Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, July 21st, 2025, and today we're talking about small farming culture, cover cropping for a year, and the story of how soil made me a farmer, more or less. So let's do it. All right, happy Monday to everyone. I hope your all's weekends were whatever you hoped them to be. Our weekend was a lot of working on soccer stuff, honestly, gearing up for the upcoming fall season, the details of which I will not bore you with, but I am excited to get to see all the kiddos again at the park. It's very fun. It takes an enormous amount of organization, but it's very fun. We also got lots of rain this past week, like lots of it. We were in a bit of a dry spell before last week, and now stuff is just going absolutely bananas, which is not super typical here in late July, but is super cool to see. Unrelated, I have a fun treat for you all this week. I think it's going to be fun, or I hope so. On Wednesday morning, we are going to go live and do the entire show that way, live. Now, Wednesday morning is not a particularly convenient time. I recognize that, but it's when Mike is here or available to help me. So the idea being that we will do the show in the morning on YouTube, and then we will post the show to the podcast feed in the afternoon. But this means that you all will be able to ask questions live as we celebrate our 200th episode of this show, which is unbelievable. We thought that could be a fun challenge for us to do kind of something different and a change of pace for you all, perhaps. Maybe we'll do one once a month or something if it goes well and you all like it, and switch it up from time to time and occasionally allow for different people to join me, that sort of stuff. But anyway, mark the old calendars that we will be going live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard on Wednesday, and probably go a full hour because I also usually have to do a little harvesting on Wednesdays, so I can't go that long. Anyway, yeah, that should be fun, provided we don't run into any technical difficulties, or perhaps those will just make it more fun. We shall see. Also, something I'd like to explore this week and maybe next week is big ideas. After I talked about land management that we could see from space last week, some folks sent in some really good examples of various sort of restoration projects that I spent some time this weekend looking into. I love that sort of stuff, and I'm getting a lot of inspiration from it right now. So that is very cool, and I hope you will continue to put your ideas or things that you come across in the comment section. Last bit of housekeeping here. I feel like I'm doing a lot of it this Monday, but it is Monday. Why not? We want to see your harvests. So your job this week is to send us a 20-second video clip. Send it to farmermike@notillgrowers.com with your harvest. Indeed, even if you've already submitted a video, feel free. Maybe it's a basket of veggies or a walk-in cooler full of greens or whatever. We really love having you all be a part of the show and want to keep that going. So yeah, show the harvest, tell us where you're at, and also send that to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Anyway, all of that out of the way, something that has been on my mind this week is the show The Bear, the show about the restaurant. No spoilers here, don't worry, because I loathe nothing more than spoilers. Actually, I probably hate something more than spoilers, but for now, spoilers are the worst, so I won't do that to you all. For the uninitiated, this is a show, The Bear, about a restaurant in Chicago, and one of the things the show does fairly well as someone who cooked for a long time myself, is it captures, albeit dramatized with perhaps less alcohol and debauchery and yelling than it was when I was in the business, the culture of kitchens. Kitchen culture is a thing, and it was really well examined by people like Anthony Bourdain in his book Kitchen Confidential, albeit perhaps with a bit too much alcohol and debauchery and yelling. Cooking is an intense job that takes place often later into the evening with long hours, and although kitchen culture has changed a lot over the years, there seems, at least from the outside now, some continuity among the types of personalities and environments you step into. Every kitchen is its own thing, has its own language, has its own microculture, but cooks are largely cooks, and I think The Bear portrays this reasonably well. Of course, any of the cooks who listen to this can feel free to agree or disagree, but it has also left me wondering about small farms, and if small farms have their own sort of visible culture too. Like cooking culture is such a thing that Bourdain jump-started his writing career talking about it, and it necessitates, or at least supports, its own dramatized television series. My question is, does small farming have that? In the same way that cooks have a very large shared experience, does the modern farmer have that same sort of thing? Of course, I invite your insight here, but I think the answer is duh, absolutely. And just about anyone who has been at a farmer's market has seen it, like can visibly see it. I have traveled all over the States for conferences, and the look on the faces of the people who attended those farm conferences was almost always the same. Where cooks tend to be the product of intensity and pressure, I think small farmers are often the product of physical labor and pressure. pressure. Strong-shouldered, with a mix of bewilderment and determination on their faces, they tend to come to conferences and markets in their best-looking work clothes because they are usually coming from chores and later going home to do more chores. Farmers give hearty hugs and commiserate just as heartily. The market, the weather, the climate, I think a lot of farmers have a different kind of shared experience than cooks because it's not the camaraderie that is shared, but often it's the isolation. The challenges of raising kids on a farm, the challenges of missing friends and people, the weather, always, but the joys of potlucks with the greatest food imaginable and talking about it all at conferences. Anyway, I think if I have a point in talking about this, it's to think about what the culture of the modern small market farmer is and what it says about our industry. If ever there was a show like The Bear, but for farmers, would farmers know if they got it right or wrong? Would it be evident? Has there been such a show? And I'm not aware of it, specifically a drama. My guess is we would be able to spot the fraud because being a small farmer is such a specific world to me, but I'd be curious to hear what you all say. Is there a specific, very identifiable small farm culture that could be in theory represented on screen? Anyway, that seems like a good place to kick off the week. Let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, let's break real quick. And when we come back, should you cover crop for a year if you can? I mean, that's probably self-evident, but let's talk about it. BRB.
Dime dónde vas y en qué pensás.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Stephanie Sommer, who writes, quote, "Thanks, Jesse, for your insights. I've been following you for a few years and have read your book numerous times, practically worn it out. Learning a great deal." Thanks, Stephanie. My questions concern cover cropping. Do you ever remove a bed from production to cover crop it for an entire year? How often does an individual bed get a cover crop? I'm in the beginning of setting up my new homestead and have ultimate plans for 18 4x32 foot beds. Once I achieve that, I'm considering using only 12 beds each year and cover cropping the remaining 6 for the year. That would result in each bed getting refreshed every 3rd year. I'd love hearing your input on that. End quote. All right, Stephanie, great questions here. Thank you. And I'll kind of take each question individually somewhat. First, do I ever take a bed out of production for an entire year just to cover crop it? Well, let's look back at a couple years when this farm was at its peak in production, because it is certainly much more possible now that we're not trying to produce as much food and maximize every square inch of our production area like we were. So when we were doing that, however, when we were producing on a full acre a couple of years ago, we separated out short season crops like carrots, lettuce, squash, green onions, that sort of stuff, from our longer season crops. That would be like potatoes, sweet potatoes, garlic, some late tomatoes, that sort of stuff. So the short season and the long season crops had their own plots that they were rotated through. Like the long season crops never went to the short season side, and the short season side never really went to the long season side. The long season plots, I could, for instance, grow a bed of sweet potatoes, and then after the sweet potatoes come out, I could put in some rye and vetch. The next year, I could kill that rye and vetch, and then sow some sorghum Sudan grass for the summer, followed by garlic in the winter, something like that. So that would be almost a full year out of production. But the reality is that it was pushing it a little bit, because we ultimately did need that growing space where the sorghum Sudan grass was if we wanted to keep growing our business, specifically for the late field tomatoes that we would often do, which could be out in time for the garlic. So instead of growing that sorghum Sudan grass, we could use that rye cover crop mulch to help mulch a round of late tomatoes in this case, and then pull the tomatoes and then plant the garlic. Now we could do that if we wanted to, because we have more space than we used to. So in that way, yes, we could. And although we haven't this year, we may next year, just to keep those beds ready and happy in case we decide to ramp up production again in the future. Now, how often does an individual bed get a cover crop? To that, I try to get a cover crop in every bed every year if I can. But that wasn't always possible. It's certainly more possible now. But It hasn't always been possible in the short season cropping plots just because it's usually one crop right after another. Sometimes I could slip a cover crop in the mix in the fall, but I had to be careful with that so I didn't disrupt my spring with cover crops in the way. Like I didn't want a big thing of rye and vetch growing in March when I needed that bed to be planted to carrots or whatever. Buckwheat was usually my go-to in the summer because it was so fast and relatively easy to kill that if I just didn't need to plant anything for a couple weeks in a bed, or let's say like I started my beets but they weren't quite ready to go out or whatever, I could sow buckwheat to sort of hold the place there, and then I could mow it when those transplants or whatever were ready to go out. Because buckwheat grows so fast, it's ready to be mowed in 10 to 15 days or something. So generally though, I did want a cover crop at least once a year if I could pull it off. In the long season cropping area, that was part of the plan, cover crops always. I was usually only doing one crop per season there, but in the short season where I'm doing 4 or 5 crops per season, it was a lot harder to fit them in there. And I would have to get creative, sometimes relaying a cover crop directly into a growing fall crop. So germinate and be ready to take over the bed by the time the crop was out. An example of that might be like plant a bed of lettuce and then cut that lettuce. And while that lettuce is regrowing in like October, go ahead and re-sow like a rye and vetch or something underneath of it. And so that way, by the time you get that second cutting, it's starting to come through, and then you can just let that take over the bed with the lettuce still there. For you though, I think that's great. If you can take those beds out of production and just use the cover crops as a placeholder, feeding the soil and not allowing them or anything else to go to seed, that's fantastic. Your plants will love you for it, and I know most farmers would likely agree that they'd love to have an equal growing space that they could simply leave in cover crops and then switch back and forth between them. That is somewhat of the dream. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and then next, story time in Champaign. Be right back.
Hello, this is Paul at Centinela Ridge Farm in Santo Domingo, Ecuador. Thanks for all you do, Jesse. Love your show.
Hey Farmer Jesse, this is Caro, growing in Syracuse, New York, zone 5B6A, my third year gardening. I have all kinds of stuff, tomatoes, peppers, there's a Three Sisters patch. I have carrots, zinnias, I have more flowers, beans, zucchini, more zinnias, cucumbers, beets.
All right, story time. It's 2008. I'm almost 26, I think. I speak some French, but not a ton. And yet here I am headed into the southern Champagne region of France to meet a small-scale vigneron there who grew what we were starting to call at the time grower champagne, small production champagnes under their own label. I'd worked in wine sales and retail for many years at this point. I'd met many winemakers over the years, but I've never actually been to a vineyard up until this moment. This would be my first trip to actual like wine country, and it would change absolutely everything for me. When I arrived, I was greeted by Chops, a dog, C-H-O-P-S, Chops. Bertrand Gouthereau, the winemaker at Vouette and Sorbet, greeted me soon thereafter. We muscled through introductions with a mix of French and English, and Bertrand asked if I wanted to see les vaches, the cows. The cows? I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I had a moment of panic when he said that. Maybe I'd heard him wrong, or maybe he was confused why I was there, or my French was just that bad and I didn't understand what was going on, or maybe they were award-winning cows and he was just like wanting to show them off. No idea, but I said, sure, let's go see the cows. He grabbed a pitchfork and we hopped in his kind of farm van. Shops joined in. To me, I was there to learn about winemaking, so it was odd to suddenly find myself standing in a field looking at cattle, but he explained these were where the wine started. You see, Bertrand utilized the cow manure in some of his soil amending preparations. To him, this was winemaking. Next, he took me into the vineyards and we began inspecting the soil, the leaves, the grapes. His neighbors, who I believe were family, had vines right next door, and we got to kind of compare what his vineyards looked like and what his neighbors' vineyards looked like, inspected the soils, looked for signs of life, whereas his neighbors' soils were kind of dusty and hard. Bertrand's soils were dark and rich and full of earthworms. I loved watching him because he kind of bounced around the fields sort of gleefully. I mean, the flavor of his grapes, the smell of those vineyards, it was just incredible. And we did eventually taste the wines, and they were also incredible, but I will never forget his enthusiasm about the soil, about the cattle, about the way the leaves looked, about the grapes themselves. I'll never forget how much it shifted my brain from thinking about where wine ends up, fancy restaurants, dimly lit bars, dinner parties in cities, and where it starts, not just in the vineyard, but in the cattle. Anyway, I was thinking about this when I think about what people have to look forward to when they start a garden or they start a farm, and how we often think about the end product, the food, and forget just how exciting it is to be engaged with the ecology and systems that produce the tomato, the grape, the wine, the good time. I mean, it kind of changed my entire life. Shortly after that experience, but heavily driven by it, is when I was like, okay, I guess I got to figure out how to become a farmer now, because I just could not find that same level of enthusiasm in anything else I wanted to do. I wanted to find what Bertrand had for the soil and life. So yeah, that's where it all started. All right, I guess you are done now, Monday. Good times as always. Don't forget No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. She would be happy to help you out, and also say happy birthday to her. It's a belated happy birthday. Shouts to Michelle. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat, like one of these, or the corduroy ones, or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, got such a good list today, Alan Nixon, Alice McMahon, Benjamin Daughtry, Kayla, Tyler Lloyd, Plant Honey, or Planthony. I like Planthony, but it could be Plant Honey. Could be both. Could be Nope, never mind. Ian at Grindstone Farms, Yvonne Rue, and Keith Knowles. Shouts you all. So many good ones so many new signups over the weekend. Thank you all. Okay, then I feel a little bit of pressure for a good story this week. All right, so this week's story is about a farmer who was at market one day and is asked by a somewhat mysterious customer of theirs, regular but mysterious, if the farmer would come consult with them on building a farm in the area, and very, very large farm. They were wanting to get into farming. And anyway, the farmer is a little bit hesitant because it's summer, they're busy. And also this is a very mysterious and somewhat strange customer, but eventually kind of agrees to it when the mysterious customer offers $2,000 per day, because yeah, that's hard to turn down. Because there's something just a little bit, I don't know, off about this particular customer. The farmer does ask if they can bring a friend to help, and the mysterious customer agrees, even offers to pay the friend the same amount. So that's awesome. The farmer says, great, we'll be there. Then the farmer asks a friend in the booth over that sells flowers if they want to make a couple grand doing this farm consultation thing. And she says yes. And the next day they arrive at some giant steel gates that lead back into the woods, presumably to the house of the mysterious customer. And that is for tomorrow on the farm stay. It's a good spooky name. I like that. All right. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you then. Bye.